Welcome to ILTV Security Brief. I'm Caleb Ben David. Each week, we focus on the latest developments in security and defense relating to Israel and the Middle East, impacting on this region and beyond. And we start with our top items of the past week. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu hold two meetings in Washington in which they discuss future plans for Gaza and dealing with Iran. Israeli officials say while progress has been made towards a hostage deal, gaps with Hamas remain on reaching a 60-day ceasefire. 5 soldiers are killed and 14 wounded by a roadside explosive device in the North Gaza neighborhood of Beit Hanun. And another soldier, Master Sergeant Abraham Azulai, is shot dead during an attempted kidnapping. Casualties have risen sharply the past month amid the offensive that has seen the army seize control of nearly 2/3 of Gaza. The IDF says in recent days it has conducted raids into southern Lebanon, targeting Hezbollah weapon depots and other military infrastructure. Israel says that Hezbollah activity in the border areas violate the ceasefire agreement that ended fighting in the north last November. The Israeli Air Force carries out strikes against Houthi targets in Yemen, including the Hodeidah port, power stations, and a hijacked vessel being used by the Iran-backed rebels against shipping. The Houthis respond with more ballistic missile launches at Israel that failed to hit their target, the latest setting off alarms across central Israel early Thursday morning. A terror attack Thursday outside the Rami Levy supermarket at the Gush Etzion Junction in Judea, just south of Jerusalem. One Israeli was killed in a stabbing attack by 2 assailants before the terrorists were neutralized. And now the big story. Prime Minister Netanyahu traveled to Washington this week to meet with President Trump on a number of security issues, with Gaza topping the agenda. Trump made clear he wants to see a hostage and ceasefire agreement as soon as possible, and it does appear that one is close. The deal on the table would see 10 living hostages and the remains of 19 others freed in return for a 60-day ceasefire. The release of Palestinian security prisoners, changes in aid distribution, and a pullback by the IDF from some areas in Gaza, an issue still not resolved between Israel and Hamas. Here's the Prime Minister in Washington and IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir speaking on Gaza.
President Trump and I have a common goal. We want to achieve the release of our hostages. We want to end Hamas rule in Gaza. We want to make sure that Gaza does not pose a threat to Israel anymore. In pursuing this common goal, we have a common strategy. Not only do we have a common strategy, we have common tactics. This doesn't involve pressure, doesn't involve coercion, it involves full coordination. President Trump wants a deal, but not at any price. I want a deal, but not at any price.
פגענו קשות ביכולותיו השלטוניות והצבאיות של חמאס, ובזכות העוצמה המבצעית שהפגענו, נוצרו התנאים לקידום עסקה לשחרור חטופים.
And for more, we're joined by retired IDF Colonel Itamar Yaar. He's the former deputy head of the National Security Council and head of Commanders for Israel Security. Itamar, thank you for joining us. Are the conditions there for a hostage, or at least the 60-day ceasefire, should Israel agree to the hostage, at least on the parameters that we know exist?
I think that the answer is definitely yes. More than it, I think that this is the answer for the last few weeks already. But we are all waiting for our leaders to decide that it's the right time for them. I think that military, we have done the best that we could have done in Gaza. I think that any day that we are still there doing the same thing, we risk our soldiers and we will achieve nothing more than we achieved already. It's much better tactically to go out and from there to collect information, to collect intelligence, and to target those that need to be targeted. In the current situation, our soldiers are the target, and this is from the military point of view. Not to mention, of course, what does it mean that the hostages are still there, waiting, suffering. And again, I would like to emphasize, we speak about some kind of a deal, that the release of the hostages and moving the IDF out of Gaza is only part of the deal. Other parts of the deal is bringing in a group of other countries together or under the invitation of the Palestinians to try to take actions instead of the Hamas. Unless we will allow others to go in and to do what they need to do within Gaza, the only options for the Palestinians are the Hamas. And this is, at least publicly, exactly the opposite of what the government is seeking for.
But what about those who say that Israel, the IDF has to remain in some parts of Gaza, for example, the Morag Corridor, which has been mentioned, to maintain security? That's one of the sticking points. And of course, the other is are the conditions ready for a full withdrawal to create that kind of, for example, alternative force in Gaza that will maintain security?
Almost nobody, including the Hamas, is not mentioning that the IDF will leave the entire Gaza Strip. Everybody, including the Hamas, understand that the IDF, at least for the time being, will stay on some areas there.
The buffer zones.
The buffer zones and the Morag area is not one of them. As far as I believe, the Morag zone was mentioned only as some kind of a trick to bring to the table something that Israel will be able to give up later as part of the negotiations. The point is that every day, as I said, every day that we are waiting, we will not achieve anything more than we can achieve now. And the price that we pay is higher than what we need to pay anyway.
But would an alternative force be able to maintain security there while Hamas still controls parts of the Gaza Strip, still maintains to some degree its arsenal?
There are 7 Arab countries that declared almost a year ago that they are ready to bring their people inside Gaza, and the Hamas have said as well that they will accept it. The Hamas insist that nobody will come and will collect the Kalashnikovs that they have. The Hamas as an organization, as a military, something that we saw during the October 7, as a military, the Hamas is not existing. What we face now is some kind of a guerrilla warfare. It's exactly what we suffered from during more than 20 years in Lebanon. It's exactly the same thing. So the right way to deal with it is to go out, to make what we need to make, even after we will go out, as we do now in Lebanon. And you just show what the IDF is doing in Lebanon as part of the ceasefire, and nobody claiming that it's not part of the agreement. This is exactly what should be done in Gaza. Yes, the Hamas activists on the ground will not disappear. The only way to dismantle them as fighters is to bring somebody else that will allow the Palestinian people in Gaza to speak with that force and not with the only force that still exists, and this is the Hamas.
Right. Well, since you're raising the possibility, what are the odds that during this during a negotiation process, during talks towards a final agreement, other countries, for example, Saudi Arabia, which until now has basically declined to address the security situation in Gaza under current circumstances, will be willing to then join in and to assume some control over Gaza, or at least on the administrative level?
Look, 7 countries, leading by Egypt, Jordan, Saudi, the Gulf states, even Morocco, have said publicly they are ready to bring their people in. But the only way to do it is under some kind of invitation of the Palestinians. Why? Because it's a symbol to show that everybody, except Israel, the Israeli government for now, understand that in the long run, those that will control the Palestinian territories, including Gaza, will be Palestinians. We don't mention the Palestinian Authority. Why? Because everybody understands that the Palestinian Authority is not able, at least not for now, to do the job. But they need the invitation. Why? Because they can't go in under some kind of invitation of Israel. So they need a Palestinian invitation. They are ready to do it, and they will have to deal with Hamas. And I will say it again. The Hamas people have said, we will accept it, but of course, they will not give up every Kalashnikov that they have. Israel is strong enough and we need to be ready to use the huge victory that we achieved already in every front to go on to the other or to the next kind of measures that are not using only force. Those the things that we will be able to solve all the problems using force are wrong. And the best way to show how wrong they are is what had happened today in the West Bank. We have full control in the West Bank for many, many years. What does it mean? That Israelis are not being killed in the West Bank? One of them was killed today, and we see it from time to time. So the situation in the West Bank, in many sense now, is even worse than the situation in Gaza. So we need to change the whole situation, and we need to bring other people in. You know, when you study mediation, you know that the basic rule is bring inside a third party. But a third party that will not speak only, a third party that will be ready to bring something to the table, to help to do things on the ground, and we are exactly in this situation. Yesterday, in the Knesset, there was some kind of a meeting. There were Israelis. There was a senior Saudi guy, a journalist,
a Saudi journalist, right? For the first time,
commentator, that was ready to come to the Knesset in the middle of the war, and a Syrian guy that is in close contacts with the Syrian leader, Ashar. Both of them said, we are impressed by the Israeli forces. We are impressed and we are happy even that Israel have done what Israel have done to the Iranians and to the allies of the Iranians on the area. It served us, as they said, the Syrians, the Saudis, the others. But now it's time to try to use it and to try to go and to reach to a situation that will allow to build some kind of stability in the area. We have proof already that what we are doing in the last few months already in Gaza achieved what we see is the maximum that you can achieve. Mm-hmm. We will not win a guerrilla warfare. What does it mean? It means that we will have to deal with these kind of actions daily or weekly, and there is no reason why not to change the situation.
All right. Since you mentioned Iran, I do want to also touch on that. Certainly that's in part of the discussions between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump in Washington. I'm sure part of that is who is going to deal with Iran if, in fact, they start enriching uranium again. There have been some reports, for example, of the U.S. perhaps supplying Israel with the B-2 bomber, if necessary. How do you see that going forward? Who's going to handle Iran if military action is again needed?
Iran is the main, almost the only real threat to Israel.
Existential threat.
Yeah. And there is no question that everybody that can need to monitor what is happening in Iran. We didn't achieve a full victory on Iran. The Iranians still have capabilities. It will take them more time, but still the knowledge is there. Some equipment are there, some materials are there. It will take time, but we didn't succeed. And those that thought that in one operation we can finish the whole Iranian program. The good news is that the Americans and President Trump himself are committed, and they showed their commitment by supporting Israel in public and by targeting the Iranians by the Americans themselves, not only through Israel. And I'm sure that President Trump, that still have a few years in office, will not want that in a year or 2 or 3 years, the Iranians will show that they are in the same situation like North Korea, something that will be something similar to what kids are saying, you have taken your finger and put it into your eye.
Right.
President Trump will not be able even to let it do. So Israel and the Americans, and I'm sure that some other allies as well, have an interest, including all the Arab countries, that help us in a way on this operation to make sure that Iran will not reach nuclear capabilities.
And let me just briefly, Syria, do you see the chances, you've mentioned them before, for a security arrangement with Syria?
The answer is yes. And you have used the right term. It's not peace with Syria. Hoping that in a matter of time, it will bring us to a situation where peace will be one of the main options. For now, we speak about something that is much limited. We speak about stability along the Israeli-Syrian border. And for that, we need cooperation with the Syrian regime. Nobody can be sure that the Syrian regime will be a regime that will be able to sign peace agreement with Israel in the coming years. But we need to check the option. And again, it's all a matter of interest. We have an interest to limit the Iranian influence in Syria, even the influence of Turkey in Syria, to help the Americans to strengthen the American influence with cooperation with us. It's an Israeli interest. It's not a price that we need to pay.
All right, Itamar Yaar, it's interesting to see how events develop in Gaza and regionally. Thank you for joining us on ILTV Security Brief.
Let's do, each one of us, the best that we can do.
Thank you for that. A tragic incident in Gaza this week, a roadside bomb explosion killing 5 IDF soldiers and wounding 14. But what made this incident stand out even more is that 4 of the soldiers killed belonged to the Netzah Yehuda Brigade, a special IDF unit created to enable haredi, or ultra-Orthodox troops, to serve in the IDF without compromising their strict religious beliefs. Now, their deaths highlight the growing contributions of haredi soldiers to the IDF, but it does come amid a contentious debate over a new law that is supposed to increase that contribution by limiting the draft deferments that have enabled most young ultra-Orthodox men to avoid military service. This law would also enact harsher sanctions on those who do. Well, joining us for more on this is Rabbi Tzvi Klebanow, president of the Netzah Yehuda NGO. And Rabbi Klebanow, thank you for joining us. First of all, tell us a little more about the Netzah Yehuda Brigade.
Well, the Netzah Yehuda is a battalion under the Kfir Brigade. And just now we celebrated 25 years since we formed together with the IDF and the Ministry of Defense, so our organization, which is a civilian organization. So we helped form this battalion. It wasn't a battalion then, it took a number of years. But today we have over 3,000 active soldiers and have over 22,000 veterans. And we're very, very proud of our soldiers. They've been in for better part of over a year now. They've been participating in Gaza and have had significant achievements. And although we suffered a very, very difficult time, and we're continuing to go through a very difficult time, we're very proud of our soldiers, and we're there to help them get through this.
Right, you talked about a significant blow. Talk about the reaction to the death. Of course, all the soldiers we should mourn, but the ones from Netzah Yehuda. I mean, very moving scenes, for example, from the funeral of Moshe Noel there in Beit Shemesh. What have you been hearing in your community?
Well, I've participated with the funerals. The funerals are heart-wrenching. It's one thing to talk about big numbers. It's another thing to participate at a funeral and hear a mother, be maspid. How do we say maspid? To
give a eulogy, to eulogize.
To give a eulogy for her son. The particular hardship here, which is hard in any case, is that these 4 young men were from the same platoon, and their friends that were injured were also in the same platoon. Makes it extra hard when it's a small group and a relatively high percentage of soldiers from the same platoon are wounded. There was an attempt to kidnap some of these soldiers. They fought bravely under fire. There was an initial detonation of a mine, and when the other soldiers ran to help their comrades, they were ambushed and opened fire, and they had to get the injured out. They had to get the fallen soldiers out under fire. It was a very, very, very difficult thing, but they're very brave and very courageous, and they did everything they had to do.
How do you respond to some of those voices in your own community, which we even hear now, that say you can't serve in the IDF and still maintain the religious observance that is accepted in the haredi community? Because that is part of the discussion, of course, related to this IDF conscription law.
Right. Well, the main goal of our organization and the main goal of forming the Netzah Yehuda unit, which today is not only Netzah Yehuda, but it's also other venues in combat units, in paratroopers, in Tzanchanim, in Givati, plus the battalion in Netzah Yehuda. The goal here was to create an environment within Tzahal, within the army, that would allow a young Haredi man to serve as a combat soldier without having to compromise on religious issues. And that for the most part has been done. That has been accomplished. It's really up to the young man. Now, where the error is, if I may say so, where the problem is that in the Haredi community, and we are all of the same belief in this, there needs to be people that are sitting and learning Torah, because we believe that that's what allows us to live in Eretz Yisrael, and that's what allows us to be victorious, not only Netzah Yehuda, the entire IDF. At the same time, there are thousands of young Haredi men which are not learning in the yeshivot. They're not studying all day. And there's no reason for those young men, thousands of them, not to serve in the Israeli army. And we have provided for them an environment which allows them to serve without compromise. And all we need to do is to create more venues and make that more attractive to this youth. And then that will really solve the problem. Because we don't need the entire Haredi community. We need thousands of boys, but there are thousands of boys that are not learning in yeshiva.
Right. Well, maybe the example of these brave young men, maybe their memories be a blessing, will serve as an example for them. Rabbi Tzvi Klebanow of the Netzah Yehuda NGO, thank you for joining us on ILTV.
Thank you very much.
And now a final word. Already in the first hours of the October 7th attack, it was evident from the photos and videos which quickly circulated that along with murder, mutilation, and torture, there were likely instances of sexual violence perpetrated by the terrorists. Specific accounts of this have emerged over time, but documenting these cases has been difficult, given the need to protect the privacy of those abused and the victims silenced by murder. Now, most of those who have spoken out have done so anonymously, with the notable exception of former hostage Amit Susana, who bravely recounted the sexual assaults she suffered at the hands of her Hamas captor. In recent months, there have been reports dealing with this issue, but none so complete as that released this week by the Dina Project, an initiative carried out by a team of leading Israeli female legal and gender experts. Their investigation was conducted over months, collecting testimony from former hostages and survivors of the attack, examining forensic evidence from bodies that showed signs of rape and abuse, and placing those findings in the global context of how conflict-related sexual violence is sometimes used as brutal weapons against civilians. The report concludes that Hamas used rape, sexual abuse, and humiliation as part of a deliberate genocidal attack during and after October 7th. And it proposes new legal definitions and strategies to pursue prosecution of those both involved in these offenses and those who enabled them. The report constitutes a sharp rebuke against those who continue to deny or downplay the sexual violence employed by Hamas on and since October 7th, be it the UN officials and agencies who focus solely on alleged abuses by Israelis while ignoring those committed by Palestinians, the journalists who fail to cover or even mention these abuses as part of the context for the war in Gaza, and most damning, those women's groups in the Western world who betray their fundamental missions by failing to acknowledge the very crimes for which they were created to help protect their fellow sisters from becoming victims of. The Dina Project is named after the biblical character of the patriarch Jacob's daughter, who in the book of Genesis is raped by the Canaanite Shem, spurring a rampage of revenge by her brothers. But it is not revenge the Dina Project seeks, but justice, a justice that Israel and the world must pursue. Now, also in the biblical account, Dina's own voice is conspicuously absent, which makes it even more fitting that this effort is giving voice to those women, both living and dead, whose pain and suffering must be recognized and whose accounts remain to be settled. Thank you for joining us on ILTV Security Brief.